My name is Ashley. I'm the Volunteer and Outreach Coordinator here at the Napa County Resource Conservation District. Thank you all for joining us. For those of you who don't know, I see a few new names in our participant list, but for those of you who don't know, the Resource Conservation District is a non-regulatory agency, and we operate here in Napa County throughout the entire county. And we don't have any, any real teeth, any regulatory function that we provide. We basically just help you care for the land, water, soil, and wildlife in Napa County. Right now, we are right in the middle. We are 19 days into Bay Friendly Garden Month. Used to be Bay Friendly Garden Tour one day, but with our current fun experience that we're all having here, we are kind of stretching this out into an entire month's worth of activities. So we've had a couple of Zoom presentations and online lectures, things like that, that are available on our website and Facebook. And you can get more information about that by joining our email list. You can just go ahead and email me. I'll throw my contact information into the little chat boxes. So if you'd like to be added to our email list, feel free to send me an email and I can make that happen for you. So Garden Month is something that we put on every year, well, Garden Tour or Garden Month, something we put on every year with the City of Napa Water. So we're really excited to have them as a partner. And we also are doing monthly and weekly newsletter updates. So anything from, different news happening here in town to different activities that you can do while you're sort of cooped up indoors alone. So keep an eye out for all of those. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Marcy. She's a Bay-friendly landscape designer and master gardener right here in Napa County. She lives and works here, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Marcy. She's going to share your screen with everybody, and she'll take it away.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Is that working?
Yes, looks perfect.
Right. Seeing what I hope you're seeing?
Yes.
All right. And the sidebar screen, Ashley, is covering up part of the picture and the text?
So we can't really do anything. Every single person has control over their own little sidebar. So if people can't see it, they can move that little bar around to different places.
Okay. And I just nudged a little bit, so we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And even if you're not tuning in today, but you think you might be tuning in the future, thanks again for your attention. Designing sustainably is such a good fit for everything that we're trying to do, and it certainly soothes my soul. It's what I hope to accomplish in my own garden, but also in support of anyone who contacts me through Master Gardeners or through Bay-friendly landscaping or requests my services as a landscape designer or consultant. To do it sustainably just makes sense. This earth is precious and we want to live on it with gratitude, and working in our gardens in a sustainable way or designing our natural environment in a sustainable way just makes sense. So if you bear with me, I'm going to, Ashley already gave you a little bit of a rundown of what Bay-friendly means and what Rescape California means, but I'm going to elaborate just a tiny bit. This all started with an organization called StopWaste.org in the East Bay in Alameda. And they were realizing, the Alameda is built on landfill, they needed to do something about the waste that kept piling up. And so they developed 7 principles of sustainability in dealing with landscape and landscape design. That gradually morphed into Bay-friendly Landscape and Gardening Coalition in 2009. And then that became Rescape California, which has a slightly broader reach. And then in 2017, Eco Landscape California merged. So it's an even larger organization now. The focus is still largely on sustainable practices that impact our watershed. So from the Sacramento River, San Joaquin River, the Delta, and San Francisco Bay. And I'm going to give you some overview information, but if you want to go deeper, you can contact NRCD, or you can contact Rescape California. It's pretty easy. You just go in there and rescapecalifornia.org, and you'll get a lot of the information that I'm starting out with here. This is bootlegged right from the website. These are the 8 regenerative principles that Rescape California hopes to foster in our landscape design and in our home gardening. And I'm going to go through it in some detail because this is the background. This is the background for any design that we do or that I hope to do. Just like the earth is the ground underneath our feet. We need to start with the basics and then it'll all make sense. So as I go through different landscapes, maybe you can, I'm going to treat it like a quiz. You can say, oh yeah, that was that act local thing. Or yeah, this is about nurturing the soil. And you can see how many of these things you can pick out for yourself. So the first is acting locally. And I always, English teacher, always want to correct that, act locally. But on the other hand, it's also inviting us to act like a local. We recognize that we and what we do make a difference. We're making a contribution to our world, or we are having a deleterious effect on our world, but it's not nothing. It matters. And when we start to understand that what we run off our property and down into the storm drain goes straight out to the Napa River and out into San Francisco Bay through San Pablo Bay, whatever we put down there has greater impact. All of the ecosystems that are touched as that water or product or whatever it might be heads downstream is impacted by what we do. So the impact may seem small, just like these little people here, but the contribution can be great. So I hope you can see those little people. So the first thing is to reduce waste. So think about it, plan ahead. Do your shopping with an awareness of how much waste is generated, how much pre-packaging and layers of packaging are involved in whatever you purchase. In your landscape, salvage, retain, or reuse whatever you can. If you're taking something out, is there somebody else who can use it? Can that be put out there on Nextdoor or on Craigslist? Can you use it yourself on your own property in some creative way? Try not to just dump stuff, including yard waste, because even that has to be hauled down to the landfill or hauled down to waste disposal. And then there is a process of converting it into wonderful compost, but that's still a process. So if you can keep it right on your own site, that's going to be far more efficient and reduces impact significantly. You want to avoid planting invasive species because they do get away. Even if you don't live in the urban wildlife interface, some plants release seeds that can be airborne at great distance. And here in our wonderful valley, we're never too far from the wildlands, and we want to be respectful of that. That is such a privilege that we have, being this close to being able to go for a hike. But what comes with that is a responsibility for taking care of our hills, of our valley, of the watershed itself. So keep that green waste on site. If you can compost it yourself, please do. And mulch and grass cycle. The great news about grass cycling is you don't have to rake up the grass. When you mow, keep your mowing level fairly short so that it can just drop right down and mulch your lawn at the same time you mow. But we're going to get into lawn alternatives later. The next thing up is nurturing the soil. And I'm sure you've heard all of this. We've been talking and talking and talking about the importance of the soil food web and the incredible number of microbes that live in the soil. There are more microbes in 1 teaspoon of soil than there are human beings on the planet. It's incredible, isn't it? That in 1 little teaspoon, there's all that life, all that activity, and we need it. Soil is made up of the aggregate, the mineral aspect. It's made up of organic matter, and there needs to be space for air and for water, and the rest is living flora and fauna, and those guys work hard. They are the ones that take the nutrients in the soil and convert it into a form that can be absorbed by the plants. In fact, I've seen an amazing video that was done with an electron microscope somehow, I'm not sure how, that shows an exudate that emits from roots, and it attracts mycorrhizae and other microbes that bring the nutrients to the roots in a form that the roots can then take up to support the plant. It's magical. There's so much going on under there, and more is being discovered. This is an exciting time to live. So if you feed the soil, you are feeding your plants. It makes more sense to make sure that your soil is healthy than to dump fertilizer on a plant hoping that's going to work. Fertilizer on its own is not going to do the trick. The plants need to have the microbes in the soil to convert the nutrients into a usable form. So how do you take care of the soil besides composting and mulching? Please reduce the use of synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. A synthetic fertilizer is, I'm not going to name names, but it's sort of like giving candy to your kid. There's going to be a whole lot of energy and a whole lot of growth and a whole lot of hoopla. I'm sorry, I talk with my hands. And then there's a crash. But organic fertilizer is sustainable. It's like eating your veggies for us. It helps to sustain us for a steady growth and steady health and steady energy. So organic fertilizer is much preferred to synthetic. And pesticides, if you can avoid pesticides, please do. The pesticides stay in the soil. They perk down through groundwater. They are washed off in stormwater. And we're going to get to that later too, but you want to try not to have that stuff on your property if at all possible. Plus it kills beneficial insects and beneficial fauna that actually help to sustain the ecosystem that supports us. So here's the good news. This means really think about whether you want to dig into your dirt. Do you want to pull out that rototiller and whack everything up? Or do you want to double dig the way our grandparents did? Science is now telling us, excuse me, I know I'm touching my face. Oh no. Science is telling us that doing that disturbs the soil food web. It disrupts the microbes. The microbes are then exposed to a greater air exposure and become less active. The soil on the surface dries out and then they are not active. They need the moisture to travel. And it releases carbon. So you can put away that rototiller, you can make it lawn art, see if you can just see if you can avoid the rototilling, avoid the double digging, and avoid the leaf blower if you can, or get a low powered leaf blower if it's important for you to blow the leaves. Rake as much as you can. The raking is a lot gentler for the soil, and it doesn't blast all those micronutrients up into the air. It doesn't peel off a layer of topsoil or the natural duff that helps to retain moisture and helps to support the microbial activity in the soil. So those are two activities you don't have to do anymore. And it reduces carbon emissions. Well, next up, sequestering carbon. These redwoods are in our own valley. These ferns grow there. This is the right plant in the right place, and these beautiful giants sequester carbon for us. All plants take carbon from the air and through the magic of photosynthesis, convert it to food. So the more plant material on the planet, the more the carbon is drawn from the air and converted into usable forms that sustain the plant and sustain us if we eat that plant. Larger plants, more carbon uptake. And they sequester the carbon in their tissues and in the soil. So when you chop down the tree or you burn the field or you destroy the plants or you pave paradise to put up a parking lot, as the song goes, then you are reducing the organisms that actually take up the carbon. So it's lose-lose. You're destroying the plant and disturbing the soil. There's more carbon in the air. There's less being drawn out of the air. So sheet mulching helps to leave the soil undisturbed. It can smother the lawn if you don't want the lawn, smother the weeds if you don't want those weeds. It deprives them of light, and therefore they cannot photosynthesize, and that reduces their life force, and they move into acquiescence or death. But their carbon is still there. All the things that make that plant are right there being decomposed by the microbes in the soil. Carbon is also a factor, as I mentioned earlier. When we use power tools, there are electric ones, but a lot of folks, especially the professionals, use gas-powered ones because they don't have to worry about trailing a cord behind them. That's understandable. But if it's possible to use one that has lower stroke, it's going to use less gas, and maybe rake as much as you can, and then just finish with the blower. See if you can be a little planful, like we started out talking about. Saving water. We've all been talking about this. I mean, there were ads out years ago that said a rake and a broom are the new hose. Instead of using water to clean, use other tools. Do what you can to enhance the soil. The more tilth or pliability, looseness, openness in the soil, the more the soil can absorb rainwater, and less then runs down the street and into the gutter and out to the river and out to San Pablo Bay and out to San Francisco Bay and through the Golden Gate. So we want to keep it. We want to keep it on site. That's one of the basic precepts of Rescape California, is to try to keep resources right where they are instead of transporting them in or transporting them out. We want to be as self-sufficient on our own little plot of land as we possibly can be. So if you are redoing your garden, if you have established plants and you like them and they're healthy, keep them. Don't just rip them out, because an established plant already has a root system. It's already tapped in to the groundwater. It has already invested a fair amount of energy in its growth and development. A new plant has to do all of that all on its own. So keeping established plants puts you far ahead in terms of retaining water and having those established carbon processors on your property. Choosing native plants and plants that are adapted to our summer dry climate. Like you've been hearing about Mediterranean climate, that's ours. We have hot, dry summers. We have cool, wet winters. There are only 5 places on the planet that fit those characteristics. So, and ours is one. So we want to live with that. If we find plants that are also from summer dry climates, they may adapt very well here. There are many South African plants, Australian plants, plants from Chile, and plants from the Mediterranean that work well where we are too. Those are the 5 regions that have a Mediterranean climate. So using California natives is helpful because animals and plants tend to evolve together. Using the native plants that our local insects, butterflies, birds, other fauna are expecting for food, for shelter, for nutrients, they need to be available to them so that they can access them. Migratory birds, if they're coming through at a time when there's nothing there that they are accustomed to eating, are going to end up going hungry, and they will get stressed, and their migration may not be successful. A great example of this are monarch butterflies. Monarchs only eat, their larvae only eat milkweed. There are milkweed plants that are adapted to certain regions, and the monarch population that travels through that region is adapted to eating that particular milkweed. So I'm going to just do a little sidebar warning here, talking about habitat. If you are wanting to plant milkweed to support migratory monarch butterflies, please plant showy milkweed or narrow leaf milkweed that are appropriate for our monarch population. Tropical milkweed might be pretty, but it doesn't die in the winter, and it can carry microbes that will be harmful to the larvae that feed on them. So we want to have the right plant for our population. That's the big plug for planting natives. Saving water, capture stormwater, use gray water, use recycled water as much as you can. So think about all the water you dump, rinsing dishes, the water that you didn't finish in your drinking glass, even your leftover tea and coffee in the morning. All of that could be used to water your plants. You know, you don't have to be weird about it. Instead of dumping it down the sink, just think, okay, what plant is a little dry? And give that plant a little gift. In fact, the tea and the coffee is kind of nice. They'll like that. It's a slight acidic quality, and we tend to be a little alkaline around here, so that might work out nicely for both you and them. Hydrozoning, a big way of saving water. When you plan your garden, you want to plan so that plants are grouped according to their water needs. You have to water. It's sort of like your kids, you know, if you have one kid who's always hungry, you are probably going to end up feeding your whole family a little bit more often just to try to keep up with the hungry guy. If you have a plant that alone in this one area is very thirsty, but that whole area is on the same irrigation cycle, the same time frame, then you're going to have to water all those plants enough to keep that one plant happy. If, on the other hand, all the plants in the hydrozone needed the same amount of water, needed the same kind of soil, the same kind of light, the same kind of reflected heat, if they have the same requirements, then you're going to find your water usage is much more efficiently delivered. So some specific recommendations. You want to check your irrigation system. Please make sure, and this is the time to do it. Here we are in the spring. It's not really full-on irrigation time. This is the time to get out there and tinker around. If you have a drip system or overhead sprinklers, you want to make sure that they are working efficiently, that there are no leaks. If you have pop-up sprinklers, that there's no gravel that's caught in there. I know I said pop-up sprinklers. Wow. You could even consider changing those sprinklers out to a rotator sprinkler that is that distributes larger water droplets so that they have a greater likelihood of falling and actually watering what you want to water, instead of being such a fine mist that it gets aerosolized. And we all know that word now. And it blown away from the plants that you're trying to water, and they end up evaporating. So there's an incredible amount of water that's lost through inefficient irrigation, largely through fine mist sprinklers. So replacing those with rotator heads would be much smarter. Also, adjust your irrigation and your water delivery relative to the evapotranspiration rate. That means how hot is it out there? How dry is the air? Is it windy? So if that's the case, then more water is evaporating from plant tissue than if it's a cool or foggy or a moist day. So if we've got a streak of wind, that's when you want to check your plants, because wind dries things out. If we have a coastal wind, if it's coming out of the west or southwest, like our usual maritime breezes, those are moist. That's probably not going to harm your plants or dry them out any faster than, I mean, that's normal. That's our climatic pattern. But increasingly, the wind is veering around to the north and from the east. It's coming off land, and that dries the wind out. It dries the air, and that means that as that wind blows over our plant material, it's drying out the plants, and they may need more water. Consider a self-adjusting weather-based controller. That means it's very smart. Smart controller is sometimes called. It means it perceives whether there's been rainfall, precipitation, and it will not run your sprinkler system. If you don't have one of those, just be smart. Raining, guess I'll turn it off. It's going to rain a couple times this week. I probably don't need to water. And then actually check moisture. People are always asking, well, what do I do about watering? How do I set up a schedule? Well, you gotta check with your plants. It's just like that hungry kid I talked about a little earlier. Stick your finger in the ground. Use a moisture sensor if you'd like, but your finger works pretty well. See if it's dry down there. If it gets dry, a little bit below the soil level, then it could be time to water. But if it's moist there, please don't. You're going to end up drowning your plant. More plants die from overwatering than from underwatering. Conserving energy. We all want to conserve energy. We've got better things to do with our time. Most of us have been conserving quite a bit of energy during these days of sheltering in place. But this is for your garden. If you do use sustainable landscape techniques, you're going to have less need to shear or mow or blow. That saves a lot of time. That means that leaves you with more time to enjoy your garden, which, you know, that's what it's all about. So do a site evaluation and look around your garden. Analyze where the wind tends to come from, the orientation of your house or other buildings on your property. Which way is north, which way is south and west? North stays pretty shady. East has cool morning light. West and south gets the most powerful heat and sun. So you might want to keep that in mind when you're doing your planning. You might want to plant large deciduous trees on the south or the west side of your property so that those trees in the summertime will be leafed out and will provide some cooling influence on your home or on your buildings. And when they lose the leaves in the winter, when the sun swings around to the south, then that southern sun can move through the empty branches of the trees and warm your building. It's, you know, we all know what it's like. It's not just cats that like to sit on the south side of the house in the window on a cold winter day. Another way of conserving energy is to think about where your stuff comes from. And I'm going to talk about gardens here, but think about that generally. If your stuff is being shipped from far, far away, then you're paying transportation costs and the planet is paying emission costs. So try to be as local as you can. Buy your plants locally too. Here we're still on glassy wing sharpshooter watch. So if you buy locally from local nurseries and local growers, they are already working with our ag extension to make sure that there's no exposure to glassy wing sharpshooter. If you do purchase plants from out of the area, please call the ag inspector. They'll send a team out to inspect your plants for you. There's no charge for that. Everybody is invested in keeping our valley safe and beautiful and keeping our wine industry, which supports the community, whether you're directly involved with the industry or not. We want to make sure that that crop isn't damaged or impacted by Pierce's disease, which is carried by the glassy wing sharpshooter. There are other sharpshooters in the valley, by the way, just in case you've heard this, and they do carry Pierce's disease, but the glassy wing sharpshooter flies farther, so it can do far more damage very quickly. It decimated the wine crop in Southern California. It kind of gave that up because there's no way to really control it. The climate is warmer down there. The glassy wing sharpshooter is everywhere, so we don't want that to happen here. So here is a little bit of a sidebar. It's not something we think about a lot when we talk about landscape design, but part of conserving energy is to be mindful of electricity and lighting. So when you use lighting, use low voltage lighting and LED lighting wherever possible. And I'm going to add something to this. Having a dark sky gives us an opportunity to appreciate everything that's above us, not just below us. So if you have a motion sensor light that goes on every time a rabbit or a fox hops by, or if you have lighting that is on all the time, or even if you do solar lights, but the lights stay on long past the time that you're out there in your garden, you might want to consider rethinking that. So eliminate unnecessary lighting and make sure that the lighting that you use is efficient to your purpose and your needs. I'm not saying don't have safety lighting, of course, you need to do that. But be clever in the way you do it. Try to use LED lighting and use only the lighting that is necessary. Pretty soon I'm going to get to pictures, I promise. But this is the background. So I want you to try to keep this in mind as we start to go through some of the landscapes and projects and photos to come. Protecting water and air. Well, there's been an awful lot of evidence piling up lately in this amazing time of response to coronavirus threat. As we've been sheltering in place, the air has cleared. Not of everything. There are a lot of particulates that are still in the air that don't create the major visible impact. But it's pretty fun to go on Google Maps or go online and see how much the air is cleared up during these few short weeks. I know, not that short, look at my hair. But these few short weeks of isolation, when we haven't been flying, we haven't been in our cars, we haven't been transporting, we've been home. Other ways of saving our resources is to save the water. A few moments ago, I said, please try to keep it on site. We want to keep the water on site too. So by minimizing storm runoff, scratching nose, we want to increase the soil capacity to hold moisture. This is the soil tilth I mentioned shortly ago. Composting, mulching, it helps to avoid compacting the soil. When we run heavy equipment over soil, and this is one of the reasons why it's difficult to landscape a brand new build, because the heavy equipment has been running over the soil, compacting the soil, stripping the topsoil, stripping it down to subsoil that has very few pores and very little organic matter. So the more we can avoid that, the better. Using permeable surfaces for outdoor living spaces, for our patios, for our pathways, even for our driveways if possible, can be useful in helping the moisture, instead of running off, to soak down and to stay, moving into the groundwater. That also helps to filter the water. So water that runs off our roofs, runs off our patios, runs off our driveways, carries pollutants from the air that have settled on those surfaces and washes it down the street, into the gutter, out to the river, out to San Pablo Bay, out to San Francisco Bay, and out through the Golden Gate, hitting the ocean. So we want to try to keep it here. Some ways of doing that is to catch the water in rain barrels, in swales, in rain gardens, anything else you could think of. And a swale doesn't need to be fancy. Certainly you can get fancy. You can engineer the whole thing with special soil that's been developed for bioswales, or you can just dig a recess in a little dip, a little divot, a trough in your yard, and fill it with something interesting and let the water collect there. Route it from your rain gutters and move it into a place where it can sink into your property and move into the ground table and deeply water your plants for you. You also want to protect air and water by using integrated pest management. We talked about pesticides and fertilizers a little while ago. Integrated pest management practices help you to choose the best course, the best option, the least intrusive option possible. We want to protect the beneficial insects. We want to protect the balance, the ecosystem. And if we go in there with big guns unnecessarily, we're throwing that balance off, and it takes a long time to reestablish. We're talking about living things, and we want to support their life. So integrated pest management practices say, try this first. If that doesn't work, then try this. If that doesn't work, then try this. It's easy to find online. You can go online and just put in UC, University of California, ANR, that's Agriculture, Natural Resources, comma, IPM, and then whatever your problem is, whatever you're worried about. It could be anything. It could be voles in the garden. It could be best fertilizer to use for your vegetables. So great resource. Please take advantage. Reducing fossil fuel consumption. Here I am talking about power tools, mow and blow, trips to the dump, trips to yard waste. So even the stuff that you put out at the curb to be carried away by our waste management system, every time they need to hook up that bin, lift it up in the air, dump it into the truck, and then drive the truck down to the waste management location, uses fossil fuel. So the more we can be efficient, take your bins out when they're full, or for plant waste material, better yet, compost it at home. If you can chip it up, Compost much better, much quicker, then please do that. But take advantage. Composting at home, worm composting or having a bin it's turning your scraps into gold for your garden. So that, instead of a lose-lose, is a win-win. And plant trees. Protect water and air. Keep those gentle giants growing for us. And create a habitat in your garden. You know what? Your garden is your habitat. It is where we live. We are so lucky to be able to go outside almost every single day of the year without even getting very wet or cold. How perfect is that? And we want to be able to share that with the other creatures that live in our environment. By planting a variety of plants, you are supporting a variety of fauna, of wildlife, of plants, of animals, of creatures, insects, little furry things, birds. The more you have going on there, the more comes out to play, and the more activity you have in your garden, which is, I think, really entertaining. Also, if you can, as much as you can, plant native plants, at least some. If you want to intermix them with other Mediterranean plants, fine. But if you can get some natives out there, that's exceptionally supportive for our local insects, our local birds. As I've already discussed, they have evolved together. And if the right thing isn't ready for them when the migratory birds and insects move through, they're not going to find it, and they won't find the food that's right for them. How do you create a wildlife habitat in your garden? Basically, wildlife creatures need four things. They need food, so you have to have the right stuff there for them. They need water, they need shelter, and they need to have a place to rear their young. So, water. If you have stagnant water, still water, that's an invitation for mosquitoes to nest there. So if you do have just a shallow basin, please make sure that you empty it regularly and refresh it so that you're not allowing mosquito larvae to build up. Consider putting gravel or pebbles in part of it, because bees, for example, can't swim, but they can land on a pebble or a rock or a stick and sip a little water. If you have a swimming pool, I know that you've seen a few bees floating around in there. So see if you can give them an option, an alternative. Many creatures like moving water, and moving water deters mosquitoes from laying their eggs in the water. So this little pond that you see there is bubbling, and that bubbling takes very little energy, but it's enough to disturb the mosquitoes, to create aeration in the water, which makes it healthier for the creatures who might want to take advantage. And a lot of animals just love the moving water. It's fresher for them. And I see I see birds dipping in here all the time. This happens to be in my yard. I see birds dipping into my little ponds all the time, taking baths, taking a sip, gurgling. And then in the evening, there's evidence that possums and raccoons have been by as well. Every now and then a skunk. But you know, it's all part of the party, right? So, and a place to rear young. So don't be too quick to clean everything up. Allow some space for creatures to overwinter, especially those beneficial insects that help us in the garden. You want to, maybe if you have a large enough property, leave some brush, some uprooted plants, something that looks a little scruffy, because wildlife loves that. It's a deterrent. It's a way to keep other predators from getting them. It gives them a safe place to be. So a little tolerance with our neighbors goes a long way. So here we go. Those are the 8 basic precepts for a rescape garden. But now it's your turn. This is your garden, your earth, your patch, your turn. And this is the fun part. Now we're getting into some design. And I always recommend that my clients start out by just getting a piece of paper and writing down what they want. There's some reason why they're considering doing something with their landscape. It's either something they've always wanted or something they really hate and they want to get rid of. So whatever that might be, that's where you start. So you start with maybe 3 columns. In one column, you say, this has to happen. This is a must. This has to go. I really, really want this. I really, really want this. The next column might be things that would be nice. Yeah, I would like that. And then the third column, I call the dream column. It's what you would love to have if there was no budget restraint and no limit. Because sometimes, sometimes dreams can come true. Sometimes you can fit something in there with a little creativity and get something that's pretty close to that dream. But if you don't identify it, it may not happen. So it's usually a good idea for each of the decision makers or the budget managers to make a list. You can do it collectively, depending on your relationship, or you can do it independently, and then get together and compare lists. It's easy to do the things where you overlap, and then where you differ, you can talk about that and then see if you can come together with an idea that serves both of you, or all 3 of you, or however many it might be. This is where a designer can sometimes help. Any designer or contractor will tell you that we're part-time counselors as well. Sometimes it's helpful to have a third party. I'm not saying you have to have a designer to redo your yard by any stretch. That's why we're doing this, so that you have information and you can make it work for you. But use your imagination. Think about what you want to see out your window. Think about how you want to move in your garden. Think about what you want your garden to do for you. How you can accommodate your garden so your garden can accommodate you. So think about zones. You've defined what you want to have happening in your garden. So think about it in terms of areas. I can't tell you the number of times I've been called in to help people redo a landscape that's been decimated by dogs, or once decimated by rabbits. And there was nothing left. The whole thing was done by Rottweiler and rabbit. And that makes me look really good because there's no place to go but up. So there are times when it might be advisable to have an area of the yard that is dedicated to your animals. It's nicer for a dog to have a place where they can run, a place where they can do, poop, whatever else that your dog wants to do, dig. That's their spot. And then when they come into your zone, you don't have to yell at them for digging up the petunias or whatever else is going on. So a dog run, a chicken coop, whatever other animals do you want to accommodate? Do you want a koi pond? All of these are important decisions. So think about that. Think about play. Another major thing that we do when we go outside is we want to have a good time. Do you want a pool? Do you have a pool? Do you want a play yard for little kids? Do you want sports courts? Do you have major equipment and you need a storage zone for that? Do you have little kids or dogs and you need a patch of lawn for them? People misunderstand. They think that the lawns are anathema. It's nice to go for an alternative to a lawn, but there are times when a lawn is appropriate. What we're trying to invite you to consider is, how much lawn do you really need? If you want a lawn, could it be smaller? Could it be specific for the need that you've defined? So, do you want an outdoor eating space? Do you want a barbecue? Is that outdoor eating space for sitting at a table, or is it casual, where you're just kind of lounging in chairs and you can face each other? It could be just on a little area of decomposed granite, or it could be on an area underneath an oak tree that is covered with oak leaf mulch, and you don't mind. That's perfectly fine with the tree, and it's perfectly fine with you, and you just take your Adirondack chairs out there and have a beverage. So there are many ways of doing outdoor living spaces. Some people want a full kitchen. They want to step outside and still be in the kitchen. Does that area need to be covered, or is it okay to have it be open? The outdoor sitting space, how big a group? Do you need a private retreat? Is it your dream to have a tea garden? Would you like to have a little space where you can go out and sit by yourself and read a book, or meditate, or hang out in a hammock and take a nap? But you'd like to have it be quiet, a little bit away from the hubbub of the rest of your life, the rest of your family, the rest of your neighbors. And wildlife habitat, I can't tell you how much fun it adds to a garden to have little critters moving around in there. Do you want to sit where you can observe it? Or would you like to have the wildlife habitat further out so that the animals come and go and you don't have to deal with it, and you want things close to your house to be more groomed? That's reasonable, but just think about it. Make a plan so that this is your opportunity. It's easy to plan when you're just holding a pencil or working online. This is, a click or an erasure, that's easy. So the more upfront planning you do, the better. Do you want to grow some food? Okay. Major considerations there. How much do you want to grow? How big is your family? Are you growing just for you? Are you growing for a family of 4? Do you want to grow enough to supply the food bank? Put some thought into that. Do you want to do raised beds or in-ground vegetable gardening? Do you want a fruit orchard, or do you just want a couple of fruit trees? Do you want an herb garden, in which case you probably want it close to the kitchen so that you can run out there and snip a few herbs and run back in and keep cooking dinner? Do you want to have your vegetable beds a little bit screened from the viewing areas of the house so that although it's convenient to get to, you're not looking at it when those tomatoes or beans are starting to get a little dry and lanky? Do you need storage? Do you need vehicle parking? We all need storage. You got to have some place to put those gardening tools. You got to have some place to put those bins, the compost bin, the yard waste and trash barrels, recycling barrels. So this is a time to think about that too. And if you don't make it convenient, it won't happen. So do think about what your habits are and try to mesh what's possible with those habits as much as you can. Do you need more vehicle parking? This is time to plan for that too. And again, do you want that vehicle parking within view, or do you want it screened? I had a client once who wanted a 6-car garage for his antique vehicles. So plan. So now you've got a list of the things that you want your garden to do. You have an idea of where you want things to go. Now you have to listen to what your garden has available. Do a site analysis. Think about which way your home is facing, which way your gardens are facing. It might be skewed. It might not be exactly north, south, east, and west. It might be north, northeast, south, southwest. Just know that our major heat, our major sun, and our major weather come from the south and the southwest. So be prepared. You might want to have a little shelter at that corner of the house. The north side of the house ends up being more sheltered from most of our storms, not all of them, unless we get north wind, which does happen and more frequently. The north side of the house gets less sun, especially in the winter time when the sun gets lower in the sky and comes around from the south. So the north side of the house is going to be shadier and a little cooler. East side of the house gets morning sun, which is a cooler light than the light that comes later in the day from the west. So be aware of that too, even if you're planting in the shade of a tree. On the east side, there will be cooler light, so more sensitive plants, coastal plants could be planted on that side. On the west side, when the sun gets low and it starts sliding under the tree branches, there could still be a pretty good hit of light there and heat. So take the time to sit out in your garden and sip your tea and watch what's going on and go out at different times of the day and different times of the year. The more you learn about your garden, the more you and your garden will get along. Prevailing winds and storm direction, but the physical features of your property make a difference in how all of that feels. So on the north side of the house itself is going to be blocking some of the wind. On the south side of the house itself is going to absorb heat and then radiate it back. So the south side of the house might be a great place, or the south side of a wall might be a great place to have your citrus trees. because they're subtropical plants. They have to be protected from frost. And the more heat they get in the winter, the safer they are. So check out microclimates. Also look around and see where the big trees are, where your neighbor's trees are, because nature doesn't know about boundaries. Check where power lines are. Don't plant a big tree right under the power lines. It might be great for the first few years, but then pretty soon you're going to have to be whacking away at that thing. And the poor plant is going to lose life force. It's going to look wonky, and nobody's going to be happy. Notice where the slopes are. Notice what the drainage is in your property. Notice where the outflow is. If your property has a drainage system, there might be a little basket, it's called a basket, a little plastic thing that looks like somebody forgot something in your yard. It's upside down. If you lift that, it goes to a pipe that could be where all the outflow from your roof down through your gutters to your drain pipes go down into the outflow and out to the curb. So put a little bookmark on that. We're going to get back to that when we start talking about rain gardens. Notice what your view is in your view shed. What are you looking at when you look through your windows? Oh my gosh, it's almost 8 o'clock. This isn't working. Oh my gosh, I'm talking too much. I need to get to pretty pictures. I'm going to just bomb through the rest of this. You need to notice what you're looking at, screen what you need to screen. Here's a little garden you can look at online. Notice where north is, the play yard, the vegetable garden. Prevailing wind is going to come this way. You want to, from the south and the southwest, you want to plan shelter there. So here you go in your garden. Think about what you can reuse. Don't just rip things out willy-nilly. If there's anything you can offer out to Nextdoor or Craigslist, if you can chip things up and use it for mulch in your garden, break up concrete and use it for flagstones or use it for a retaining wall, please do. And plant to screen or disguise whatever is ugly and you have no control over. Mapping out your zones. I'm going to just move through this. You can read this on your own. It's going to be posted. I've alluded to some of it. Think about your hardscapes first. Get that down first. We want to make sure that that's permeable if at all possible. Don't make it too small. There's nothing like wishing it were 1 foot bigger. And then once you've got your zones laid out, plan your paths. You want to follow your natural inclination for a path. You don't want to wish the path were somewhere else and then have people taking shortcuts and going right through your planting. Think about the way you move in your garden and put the path there. Use an appropriate material for the kind of foot traffic that will be moving through there. If you are going to be moving yard waste barrels, you need to have something that is stable under wheels. If you have loved ones who are a little unsteady on their feet, make sure that it's smooth enough that that's not a risk. And before you set a path, especially in stone, make sure that you run chases underneath your hardscape for water lines, irrigation, and electrical lines, anything else that you might anticipate that you might want in the future. So here we go, some paths. This is ground cover. This is Diamondia. It doesn't need mowing. It has a yellow flower that can be mowed down if you don't care for the yellow flower. This is in the middle of winter. This is a January shot. This is also Diamondia, this little path over in the corner. And because this is a very spiky cactus succulent garden, that path isn't wide enough. It is a path to kind of nowhere. You can see that there's a figure there that's in front of a gate. That gate isn't used, but the path gives you an invitation and a meaning. Stepping stones, flagstones, pavers, and be creative. This is sometimes called a Hollywood driveway. It's paving between plant material. So you have to be a good driver. You put your wheels on the pavement. And the plant material is there, allowing rainwater to move right through it and nurture the soil. Another example of permeable paving. This has Diamondia planted between the paving stones, and the garden itself is gravelled. These are slabs with gravel in between. So the slabs provide steady footing, but the gravel allows the moisture to travel through. and into the ground. A bark path is ultimately flexible. As plants grow, you can just shift the path. You can add bark every time it's needed. It could be annually, it could be every other year, depending on the bark that you use. It is renewable, it is organic material, it can decompose and feed the soil. Or chip up some trees and use free tree chippings. You can contact a tree chipping company, make sure that you ask for clean chippings, and it's usually free. Sometimes they'll even dump it on your yard for you, and it keeps it out of the waste stream. This is preparing for permeable pavers that are an extension of an existing patio. So it's a base rock and the permeable pavers go on top. I apologize for the timing. I am so sorry. Here's another example of saving what's there. This is a very old patio. It's cracked, it's damaged, but instead of breaking it up and sending it off to landfill, it was used as a base for a new patio covered with flagstone. This new patio drains into the landscape and into permeable patio extension. It's gravel with flagstones. And if a bigger party happens, you can extend into that area. Here's another flagstone and gravel patio surrounded by California natives. This is it's a gravel pathway, and again, California natives. Mulch landscape, everything allows the water to drop right down through. So these are a couple lose the lawn projects. This one had the standard foundation plants and lawn that wrapped all the way around the house, and this is what happened. This particular client wanted everything in tones of blue and purple. So using, speaking of design, using a color theme, know what colors delight you, and make your choices accordingly. This feels very cool and calming. It's like an Eden. Again, permeable pavement. This is decomposed granite, and there are little flagstone, sort of like welcome mats that knock the decomposed granite off your feet before you step onto another surface. Here we are, still Rhapsody in blue. And speaking of habitat, here's a water feature that made the most of a blank wall. The wall is surrounded with creeping fig, and this water feature makes the water trickle and splash, which is delightful for insects and birds. They love it. And it can be turned on or off, and there's a float there to keep the water level even. And this particular client didn't want marauders. So this is Japanese barberry. It's pokey. And you can see the privacy that is afforded this client in a small downtown, right in the middle of traffic property. The property is for sale now. So this particular property looks different. It has a new owner with a different aesthetic. So this is kind of memorializing something that was. And some of the bones are still there. Rain catchment. Okay, so again, I'm going to allow you to read this, but capturing the rainwater I've already talked about. We want to keep it on site. We want to slow it down. We want to spread it out. We want to let it sink into the ground. We want to store it so that we can use it for watering our plants when needed. Rain barrel. There will be another presentation on rain barrels, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about this, except that it captures the water from the gutter, from the downspout, routes it into the rain barrel, and then when the rain barrel is full, the overflow routes right back down the remainder of the downspout and into the outflow of the property. So I'm going to walk you through a rain garden, and Ashley, I want you to cut in. If I just need to stop, And of course, you can all just leave. That's the beauty of Zoom. You can leave the meeting anytime you want to. This property had dying trees and a landscape that had been done long ago that was very dear to the owner's heart, but needed help. The trees were diseased, they needed to go, there wasn't a way to save them. And it's a huge pie-shaped property that had no outflow. There was a pipe that ran down along the fence and out to the street, and it gushed water every winter. So instead, we removed there were two rain gardens. One was here and one is here. So two rain gardens in that front yard that you just saw. So after removing the trees, we dug a deep swale in the north part of that stretch of property, lined it with drain rock, and then took perforated pipe that captured the water flow from the huge backyard into the front yard, interrupted it from going out to the street, and snaked this perforated pipe back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth within this swale to maximize the opportunity for the water to be slowed down and to sink into the groundwater. And then, because there was a path, we ran solid pipe underneath the path to a second rain swale. So this is another rain garden that moved down the remainder of the property. It's a little narrower, but there was so much water coming off this property, I wanted to catch as much as possible. So this is the second one. And then after those were put in place, the property was sheet mulched. And this is rough, but this shows where the outflow was from that chain of rain gardens. It ran down to the outflow. That's that little basket down there. Prior to doing this, it just shot out into the street. And this is what it looks like after planting. Here's the path that goes between the rain gardens. That's the north rain garden. And this is what it looked like this spring. What a party. And this particular homeowner, instead of the cool blues, she likes fiesta. She wanted a lot going on in her garden, and she got it. So here is a lawn that was traded in for a rain garden and vegetable beds and what turned out to be a neighborhood hotspot. Pretty nasty. This is an example of a perfectly reasonable plant put in the wrong place. This is the north side of the house. It was always shady. These are sun-loving plants, and these plants are very subject to leaf spot, to a fungal disorder, and that's what you see happening there. Because they never dried out, they never saw the light of day, and they were on an irrigation system that watered them anyway, they ended up dying. So here we go. We're sheet mulching. I'm going to root up the sod and then turn the sod over and create the berm for the rain garden. So there's the rain garden. It looks like a big donut right now, but that's the swale. And for this one, we didn't fill it in with special soil. We put drain rock and we put in the perforated pipe, keeping it below the grade of the solid pipes that run off the property. So we broke into those solid pipes, made a big horseshoe out of perforated pipe, ran the horseshoe into this swale here, and that's the rain garden. I kept the berm high because it is taking all the water from the property. There is no outflow. I didn't want it to go down the street or down into the gutter. So it's all right there on the property. And there are the vegetable beds and what was lawn. And here's the rain garden. There's a little path that's running through there. You can tell I like paths. I have a little next door neighbor. Yes, this is my property. I have a little next door neighbor that came up to me one day and said, Marcy, I want to show you my secret place. And this is a little more overgrown now. So he went in one side of the path, down into the rain garden, and up the other side. And it's like his big discovery. I love it. It's always changing. It doesn't look like this now. It has many, many morphings. It's part of the fun. In fact, one year, a client gave me, this is an Echium Tower of Jewels. It looks like a gnome. And boy, is it pollinator bait. So instead of using all that water in the rain garden, because it almost never gets irrigated, I did water it one year when we just didn't get winter rain, but otherwise it has had no water, and it all is due to the sinking down and keeping it in place and choosing natives that can handle a dry summer. And now I can use all the water for the vegetable beds, and I can feed my neighbors, which I do. In fact, one of my neighbors said for her 50th birthday party, she wanted to have it in my front yard. So here's a huge lawn. I'm going to go very quickly through this. There's no rain garden here for reasons I won't get into right now, but it is massive. It is a huge property. It extends way beyond those little trees that you see there. I'm just going to bomb through and let the pictures do the talking. These are the before pictures. Yike. Here's the existing patio being extended with permeable pavers. We're getting ready for a wedding to happen in the property. I talked earlier about zoning, planning the zones of your garden. What areas do you want? How do you want to set them up? Do you want to screen them? And how are you going to access them? So the vegetable beds had been way up in the back 40, meaning that my lovely clients who are, it's a big hike for them, had to go all the way up to the back 40 to check their vegetable gardens. So we moved them closer. Digging. We won't spend a lot of time on big equipment. And here we go. So now we've got zones. This is bark mulch on the mounds and beds. Tree chippings for the paths, and that's gravel and more permeable pavers in the fire pit area. Babies. This picture is a panorama that was taken from the roof, so you can see the zones a little bit. The mounds were used to create an opportunity for you to feel the depth of this yard. And the paths were used to sort of conceal and reveal. So the eye can go all the way back to the fire pit area, which I think of as the Wild West because of the boulders and the agaves back there. But one of the criteria this client wanted is he wanted to be able to drive all the way through his property. So the widest tree chip bark path goes all the way through the property, can go up the berm and to the back 40 from the front street. I hope I'm not going so fast that I'm getting you seasick. So the plants have grown up and they've created screening between the zones. So there's a soft sense of privacy. It doesn't mean you can't see, but you have a sense of containment. Here's the Wild West. A little yard art. Make it personal. Put your own character into your garden and feel at home there. So grass, there is a place for grass. There's no lawn here. Some of these are native, some of them aren't. Some of them could do with less water, some need more water, so the hydrozoning isn't perfect here. But it is fitting and in keeping with the olives and oaks and with the setting. These grasses have been placed so they catch the light when they're backlit. It makes them look like they're dancing. Blue grama grass is perfect for that. It has little seed pods that look like eyelashes, which is why they're sometimes called eyelash plant, or mosquito grass because they dance in a breeze. And here's another grass option. This is carex. So these folks decided that they wanted a grassy feel, but they don't have to mow this. And that saves an awful lot, not just in effort, but in water, because the longer length of this plant holds moisture. So if you don't want a lawn, you can have a party instead. You can just get a whole lot of things going on. Nature loves diversity. Diversity is key to having a habitat garden. You want to have a whole lot of plant species there so that you can feed a whole lot of critters. This is another form of diversity. This, I confess, this one is in Long Beach. This one does not need irrigation. This gets enough moisture just from the sea air. Here's another option. It looks very tidy. It looks very in keeping with the age of this over century-old cottage. But these plants don't need a whole lot of water. They use moderate amounts of water and less water in the summer, although those iceberg roses benefit from a little bit. There are so many ways to care for our gardens, and there are so many ways our gardens take care of us. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for caring about it and for making a difference in your own patch of the earth, because it matters. Thank you very much. I am willing to stay and take questions, but I've run way over time. My apologies. I've overshot by 15 minutes, actually a half hour. Ashley, I'm sorry.
No. I would have, had we had a bunch of questions coming in, I would have slowed you down and said, hey, look, we gotta either cut something or speed through something, but
stop it.
But it looks like we don't have any questions yet. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat boxes now on both Facebook and Zoom. I do want to mention that if you go to the Bay Friendly Garden Month webpage on the Napa RCD site, we do have, we've sort of compiled different subject matters into weeks. So week 1, we focused on soil, and we have an entire video about compost and how to use compost and mulch and things like that. We have, this week is sustainable garden design. So we do have a spotlight on rain gardens from another garden here in Napa. So we do have a lot of different pieces of sustainable gardening highlighted on that site that you can go to and see, a 2-minute video or a 4-minute video on how people have used these different techniques within their gardens here in Napa. So I do have a question for you, Marcy.
Yes.
From Megan on Facebook. What was the tall grass you used for the lawn a couple slides ago? Can you remind her what the name of that grass was? I don't remember.
That actually wasn't my landscape design, but I think it was probably a carex. You can use a red fescue, but red fescue takes more water. But there are carex diffusa, there are several. So I think that's what that was. If I could just interject, I think you're also going to, I touched on habitat and pollinators so briefly, but I think there's also a segment that will be on your website about pollinators and perhaps habitat gardening.
Yes, we just uploaded a video about creating monarch and the pipevine swallowtail habitat using those 2 very specific plants that those animals need. And then one thing I wanted to also mention is that we are doing an entire hour-long workshop next Thursday about integrated pest management. So go ahead and tune in next Thursday on Zoom and Facebook Live. We'll be doing a presentation about how you can use different management techniques in your garden, whether it's big or small. So yes, you are absolutely correct. We have I believe it was last week was our pollinators and wildlife focus. So we do have a few videos and garden tours that sort of focus on pollinators and creating, using native plants, as you were talking about, to encourage native animals.
If it's not inappropriate for me to say, the Master Gardeners are going to have a pollinator series in the fall also.
Yes.
So stay tuned.
Yes.
We're all figuring out how to do things differently, but our hearts are in our gardens, and we hold hands when we go there. So
yes, absolutely. And yes, definitely go ahead and check out the Master Gardener website. They have a lot of really great resources. The Napa chapter has, planting guides for when to plant different vegetables or different just plants in general. And they have a lot of really wonderful resources there for you to use as well. And we have a few people that just wanted to say thank you, Marcy. And I think with that, if there are no more questions, which I don't see anything coming through, I think that we will call it a night.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ashley. And love your gardens. Your gardens will love you back.
Great. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.